Helping welcome everyone to the UOG class lecture hall for the 15th in Robert Underwood's presidential lecture series. And so we've had many exciting presenters over the last few years, and I think tonight will be no exception. I think everybody here is looking forward to the presentation. Of course, tonight we feature Dr. Levin, and his presentation is very exciting. It's generating a lot of buzz. Before we start, I'd like to introduce a few VIPs in the audience, including the new Consul General of the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Honorable Robert Lloyd. Welcome. We also welcome the Honorable Edward Thomas Auxilian, Consul from the Consulate of the Philippines. Welcome to you. And I'd also like to welcome Edward Alvarez, who's the Executive Director of the Commission on Decolonization. I just saw him there. And I see many faculty members in attendance and others in the community, as well as my mother. And I couldn't resist one. Sorry. And Kimberly King, and she is from the Guam Humanities Council. There she is right here. Okay, Guam Humanities Council. And here's the process. Here's how this works. We're going to listen to our presenter. And Senator Tom Atta walks right in. I think totally wrong. He's going to give a speech, and after that there's time for questions, and we'll have microphones on either side, and we'll pass them around, and you can ask any questions you may have. And so at this time, I would like to introduce the 10th president of the University of Guam, Dr. Robert Underwood, to make the official introduction for our guest speaker.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. She didn't introduce herself. That's Kathleen Morlin, the Director of Integrated Marketing for the University of Guam. And you know, one of the things that this is a great opportunity for us to actually get in contact and become familiar with how we make policy. The university's obligation is to search for the truth. And the university's obligation in this search for the truth is to have evidence-based discussions and truth-based conclusions. When I was in Washington, as some of you that are my age know, I used to work in Washington, D.C. When I was there, they used to tell us, you know, you are entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Well, apparently there's some of us around here are entitled to our own opinions and our own facts. And you can select the facts, but it would be dishonest to select those that you find useful or only those that contribute to your point of view. In Guam, as in many places, we have many contentious issues to deal with concerning the nature of our society, the growth of our economy, our treatment of each other, various perspectives about historical time, and various perspectives about historical place. And of course, one of the commanding issues that we are contending with is the place of Micronesians, the number of Micronesians, and even the definition of Micronesian in this entire context. But as we deal with those issues, one of the things that people need to become more familiar with is the actual numbers. And so we are very fortunate we have today that there are people who, there are ways to find out the numbers of people, and we're very fortunate to have experts along this line, and we have one today, perhaps the leading demographer, particularly on Micronesian migration. In the year 1988, there were approximately 1,800 Micronesians from the FSM living in Guam. Today, there are approximately 18,000. That's in a growth span of 20 years. So we have with us today Dr. Michael J. Levin, who holds a PhD from the University of Michigan, and he did his field work in Europe in the outer islands of Yap State of the FSM. He is currently at the Harvard Center for Population and Developmental Studies. He has had 30 years of experience with the Census Bureau, the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Bureau of the Census, and this is where I became familiar with his work. And we worked collaboratively on a number of projects, and particularly the Department of Interior funded some of his efforts. He is well respected and highly regarded. He's done work not only in terms of our immediate region, he's done work just in the general population of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and American society. He's also done work in Alaska. He's done work in Africa. So he comes to us from a prestigious institution, and what we think to an even more prestigious institution here at the University of Guam. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Michael Levin.
Well, I don't know if I can live up to that. As Dr. Underwood has said, I have been working in Micronesia now for it'll be 40 years. Next year I went to Europic in 1973, and I have been in and out ever since. When I first came here, I stopped at the University of Guam, and there was this pizza place, Rocco's, down in the corner, and I went in with some friends to have pizza, and they said, well, we don't have any crust, but if you want the pizza in the bowl, we can give you that. And that was my first introduction to Guam. I'm going to try to talk more briefly than I had intended, so if it's too fast, then you'll have to catch up at the end, because I do want questions. Right now I'm here for the 2012 Micronesian Migrant Survey. We're doing surveys in 5 areas. Hawaii, which we started, Guam, which we're doing now, Sinai, which will start next week, and Kansas City, Missouri, and Portland, Oregon on the mainland. And we're looking at all aspects. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but the Department of Interior is required under the compact to produce reports at least with surveys at least every no more than 5 years of duration in between those surveys, and they're required to produce negative impact. They're not required to produce positive impact. And in the early years, partly because I was an anthropologist, I was able to sneak in positive impact as well as negative impact, including income and various jobs and education and so forth. But in recent years, there's been more turn to just getting the counts, which is the main thing that was required. This one we have about 100 questions on the questionnaire. If any of you are Micronesian and you happen to be included in the sample, I'm hoping that you will sit through the hour it takes to do it. And so far, we've had excellent cooperation here. I want to talk a little bit about what it's like in the sending areas, and so because I am an anthropologist and because I did the work, I'm going to show you just a little bit about where I come from. I went in 1973 to Europic, as Dr. Underwood said. There are about 150 people living on 26 acres. It's small. In fact, it's the smallest inhabited atoll in the Pacific, according to Bishop Museum publications. I didn't go to all of them. They live in subsistence, and my PhD dissertation was what happens when you have population pressure on scarce resources. This is an example of the field trip ship that we used to have to take to get out there. It was always overloaded. I'm sure you've heard recently about several instances around the Pacific where there have been some really horrible situations with field trip ships. Oh, I don't know if you, oh yeah, you can see that. This is what Europic looked like. I put this up because when we do the kind of surveys we do, we have to have maps. In this case, we're not collecting the actual locations, well, we're collecting the villages where people are living, but this is the one I did, and I want you to notice how close it resembles the United States, only it's somewhat smaller than the U.S. One of the things which I found, which, coming from a Western perspective, even with anthropology, you don't realize communal living. And even now, I'm sure many of you have come into contact with Micronesians, if you're not already a Micronesian, where you see the communalism and the importance of sharing and of putting interests of the group ahead of that of the individual. When I arrived on the island, I was told take gifts, and cigarettes were an appropriate gift at that time. And so they would take the cartons, and the chiefs got a whole carton, and then lower level nobility, I guess you would say, got packets, and then other people just got a few cigarettes. But it was divided up in a very specific way, and with no, it wasn't that there was a hierarchy, it was just mostly by age. This is my house, because one of the things that we look at in the Micronesian Migrant Surveys is housing conditions. I want to show you what it looks like when you are in the sending population. There are almost, of course on Guam, there's no more, very few people would be living under thatch, but even in the last survey we did in Saipan, there were some people who were still living in these conditions. I would be very surprised if, the last time we did one was 2003. I'll talk about what the Census Bureau did in 2008 before I'm finished. But of course this is substandard housing, and one of the things we want to look at is the change as Micronesians become more established in the various areas. The housing conditions, of course, get better as they move up in income, and so they can afford more. This is just an example of they would catch turtles, and these are on the other side's turtle eggs, and so it was subsistence living. I stayed there for about 6 months and was studying again the genealogies and who would leave, because when there was population pressure, specific people, specific genealogical categories would be the ones who would leave, go to other islands. As Dr. Underwood said, the first survey of Micronesians on Guam was one that Fran Hiesel and others did in around 1988. And then the other ones, except for the last one, are ones that I was involved in. In 1992, here on Guam, we did the first one, and it was done in Mark with Don Rubenstein and many Micronesians. One of the hallmarks of these surveys is that we involve Micronesians as much as possible. We feel that it's important that eventually the locals, or in this case the Micronesians, take over the work, because we should be working ourselves out of a job. And we've been reasonably successful. In 1992, Justin Andrew, who is now the chief statistician in CNMI, ran the 1992 census under Don, and then in 1993 he went to CNMI and ran the whole census. In 1997 we did surveys in Guam and Hawaii. These were full censuses. The one we're doing now is just a sample. In 1998 we did a full survey, full census in CNMI of Micronesians, 1999 Hawaii, and in 2003 I nearly died doing simultaneous ones in Guam, CNMI, and Hawaii. The Department of Interior requested that I train all the enumerators myself, so I was flying around. And I'll talk about the 2008 survey that the Census Bureau did at the end. This shows you the trends for, the black is Guam, and the red is Hawaii, and the blue is CNMI. And you can see that it's almost a straight line up, as Dr. Underwood noted, for the Micronesian migrants. Why do we do the surveys? As I mentioned, it's for impact reporting. First of all, there's an annual division of $30 million among 4 places right now, Guam, Northern Marianas, and Hawaii, and believe it or not, American Samoa, which gets $15,000 a year for the few Micronesians that insist on living there. And so we look at the negative impact, health, education, crime, homelessness, and we look at the positive impact, education, incomes, expenditures, and remittances. I'm going to be going into some detail in a few minutes, so I'm going over those quickly. And I mentioned the 5 areas where we're doing the sample, and we're also hoping to do some smaller cities. This was funded by the government of the Federated States of Micronesia. They passed an appropriation. Normally it would have been done by the Department of Interior. If you want to ask me a question about that later, I'll try to avoid it. But I'll try to give you information about why it's being done the way it is. But we're very fortunate that, I think Micronesia is very fortunate that the government made this decision. You can see all of the materials on the internet under 2012 Micronesian Migrant Surveys.com. And it has the questionnaire, it has all of the documents related to it. I use the Census Bureau methods and procedures whenever I do a census or a survey. And so there are a lot of documents. We have selection of enumerators, and this was done, and I have to give a lot of credit to Peter Barcinas and the Cooperative Extension Service, because without them, there would be no survey here. They've gone to extraordinary efforts to get it in the field with really extremely competent enumerators. I think you're going to find that these are some of the best data ever from this type of survey. They are really dedicated and working very long hours and bringing it in very quickly and well. The enumerators are from all parts of Micronesia, FSM only. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Since the FSM government funded it, we're only doing FSM, not Marshals of Palau. And we have some what are regular super enumerators. Guam is very fortunate to have a few people who just love to enumerate. And so those people are very, very good and very quick, and they just don't make mistakes. The sample selection is from enumerator lists. The enumerators make lists of everyone from their area. So for the outer islands of Yak, the enumerator makes a list of everyone, and then we select a sample from that. We had to have 400 households total, that's all we could afford. There are about 4,000 or so on Guam. So it'll be about a 10% sample when it's finished. And it's going to be as random as we can get it, given the circumstances, the fact that we only got the money a few weeks before we had to start the survey. So we have taken a few shortcuts, but I don't think we've done anything that an audit will not pass. Again, we're using the Census Bureau methods for doing training and enumeration. We use a verbatim training guide, so everyone in all 5 areas, Hawaii, Guam, Sinamai, and the 2 in the mainland, hear exactly the same training. We use the same questionnaire, we use the same manuals and forms, we use the same guide for training them, the verbatim guide, and there's a workbook that they go through when they're learning it. And then there's an address register, which gives us a quality control. We are enumerating in all 19 villages on Guam. We have an April 1st reference date. It's not April Fool's on purpose. It's because April 1st is when the Census Bureau does theirs, and when the census data finally come out, you'll be able to see trends for an exact point in time. We'll be running through May 7th. We'll be trying to get information on homeless, on institutions, and on non-institutional group quarters like the dorms at UOG. The way this survey will go, as with all the surveys that I'm involved in, is we'll have the enumeration, and at this point we're actively involved in the checking and coding of things that come in. In most cases, the enumerators make very few errors. When they accidentally skip a page in the emotion of the moment, we have to send it back, but we've had to do that very little. The next will be keying, where we've started practicing the keying, and we should be doing it full-fledged soon. When all the data are keyed, there will be no names. All of the information that has names on it will go back to the FSM archives, and so by the time I get it in Boston to do the editing, it will be without names. Tabulation, and then we'll have graphs and various reports. And the first report will be done by Fran Hiesel. Now, you're going to have a hard time seeing this, but I do want you to know that it does say Guam, because despite the fact there are 5 surveys, we do individualize it to a certain extent. So there are some questions that are specific to Guam on the Guam survey. These have to do with the reduced lunch program, which I thought was for dieters. but apparently it is not. So we're finding a lot. I mean, most Micronesians are taking advantage of that program. It doesn't apply, it applies, but there aren't as many in some of the other areas. This is one page of the housing. There are 2 pages of housing information, so we get the type of housing people have and characteristics, whether they're connected to a public sewer, cooking facilities, rooms, bedrooms, and so forth. And if they rent, what's the total rent and what part is the government providing in one form or another. For population, there are also 2 pages for each person, and they're the kinds of things we might expect here. Of course, demographics, education, economics, and remittances. Just to show you what the keying screen looks like, once they get the information, then it has to be keyed in, and we develop keying screens that look a lot like the census itself. Now I'm going to show you a few pictures from doing enumeration in Micronesia. I don't have pictures of what we're doing right now, but this is from the old days when I worked on censuses in Micronesia since 1973, and this one was 1980, and it was in Chuk, and they called all the enumerators together, and you can see how effective this kind of training would be. When you're standing there with 60 people looking at you, some of them looking at you. These are examples of people doing actual enumeration or being preparing to do enumeration. And then you can see how I used to work when I was the census coordinator. I think that was the 1980 census, and you can see that the other guy's drinking tuba, which is what we like to do at the end of the day to try to get through the census. This is an example of checking, coding, and keying, which, as I pointed out, we will be doing for this survey too, although hopefully not in as primitive conditions as we did at that time. The one up on the upper right, there's nothing against Chuk, but the Census Bureau required that we wrap the boxes and send it back to the Census Bureau. This was the 1980 census, and we had to put a certification sticker on the box. And so I did the first few, and then I said, okay, you do the rest of them, and they put the stickers all over the box, including right over the address. And I said, how do you think they're going to deliver this? And they said, well, we didn't think about that. And I didn't think about it either until then. All right, I'm going to talk about population characteristics first from the earlier surveys. We don't obviously have data from this survey because it's still in the field, but it will give you a feel for where it is now, and you can think about the trends. If you go to www.pacificweb.org, you'll find an incredible amount of numbers from around the U.S. Pacific, because that's our website, and we've been adding to it until Interior closed down the statistical program in 2005, so there's nothing after 2005 or 6. All right. The early impact reporting required the $30 million would only be divided among post-compact migrants and their children. Anyone who came before 1988 or so for FSM and Marshalls, or 1994 for Palau, was not included in the distribution of the funds. It was only those people who came after, and any children. Originally they wanted children of post-compact migrants, but I told them I can't give you that because I can't tell for the children when their parents came. I can only tell when the child came. So the Interior agreed that I could include all children of migrants. We're now faced with another situation because we're getting grandchildren of migrants, and the question is, do those grandchildren qualify as impact or not? And I don't know the answer to that. But in recent years, they have included all migrants, not just post-compact. So if you look here, you'll see that the number of pre-compact migrants stayed about the same between 1997 and 2003 for Guam, but the number of post-compact migrants went way up, as you would expect. This shows you, first for Hawaii, I'm showing you Hawaii now, not Guam, because I thought it was interesting. If you look at FSM 2000 census, which is the blue, and which looks pretty much like a pyramid. This is called a population pyramid. If you look at the migrants to Hawaii, you'll see that there's a big stick out in the middle, and those, of course, are the migrants, and then at the bottom, you have the children of the migrants, and then in the middle, you have the people who haven't done anything yet. And this is Guam. And this is, again, 2003 for Guam and 2000 for FSM. And if you look at this one, you notice that this population looks a lot more like a regular pyramid. Still some emphasis on migration. And the reason I want to point this out is that by 2003, as Dr. Underwood pointed out, the migration had been going on for quite a while since the compacts went into effect in the late 1980s. So there was a chance for people to become established, to start bringing their brothers and sisters, to start bringing their parents, and then they were having children of their own. So the pyramid started to look a lot more like a regular population pyramid. Now this is Hawaii, looking at 1997 and 2003 migrants, and you can see, especially in the 1997, big bulges, and those bulges, of course, are the migrants, the early migrants in this case, because they went to Guam's experience, of course, has been much longer than Hawaii's. So by 1997, there were mostly migrants and some children. But you can also see that it changed quite a bit by 2003. By 2003, started to compress in the migrants' ages, and there were more, a little bit older people and more younger people, because Hawaii has experienced a lot of migration. All right, this is Guam. This one goes from 1992 up to 2003. And so you can see that the Guam of 1992 doesn't look that different from Hawaii of 1997, and that's because it was 5 years. The migration in Guam has started earlier. So the 1992 does have many, many migrants. But if you look at the 2003, now this of course is 11 years later, it looks a lot like a regular pyramid, and that's because the families, and Don has written about this and others, that a lot of the Micronesian migration is family migration, not just individuals. The whole families are coming. I'm sure you know that already, but this gives you some idea, more ideas, of a statistical idea about it. All right, this is just 15-year age groups. And you can see that from 1990, by far the biggest was the 15 to 29-year-olds. This is all FAS, so there are a few Palauans and Marshallese in here. In 1997, it went down percentage-wise, and then by 2003, it looked more like a pyramid. I mean, it's a pyramid on its side, you only get half of it, but you get the idea here that it's beginning to look more like a normal population. We expect people to have babies, and when they have babies, it increases the lowest part of the pyramid, and then they start moving up and dying out, hopefully not too quickly. Now you can see the distribution by sex over time, and as you would expect in the very early years, it would be more male. Now this isn't true of all Pacific groups. Samoans and Tongans tend to have females migrating first, and then, but here we first see the males and then the females pass, and then 2003 it sort of goes the other direction. But these numbers are small. I mean, the differences are small. This is one of the more problematic issues now. 60% of the 1990 migrants over 25 from FAS were high school graduates. That decreased to under 50% in 1997 and down to 42% or so in 2003. There are a lot of less educated Micronesians coming to Guam. And in 1990, you can see that about 8% were college graduates, and that has decreased considerably. Now, this doesn't mean the numbers have gone down, but the percentages have gone down. This is percent. Labor force participation, you can see that the unemployment rate has gone up. Now, unemployment rates are tricky because a lot depends on what the particular economic situation is when you take the survey. But here, the unemployment was about 10% of Micronesians in 1990, went up to about 13%, and then up to about 15% in 2003. And again, these definitions, these are Western style definitions. If they happen to be doing subsistence, they're not included in this. And you can see that those in the labor force, it went down from around 68%, under 60%, and then over 60%. And the occupations are also mostly service, as you can see. In the 1990, service was the highest. In 1997, it shot way up to almost half of all Micronesians were in service industries, and in 2003, went back down to around 40%. The next largest was operators, fabricators, and laborers in 2003. Okay, now it's important as far as positive impact to realize that Micronesians do work. Many of them work in entry-level jobs, but many of them have moved up over the years. And we're finding people making $30,000 to $40,000 and even $50,000 and even more in the surveys we're doing now. And again, it's random. But there are still many, many people who are making $14,500 a year, the minimum wage, times 2,000 hours. But altogether, I mean, because those people often live in large households. In fact, I'm really quite amazed, especially compared to Hawaii. I guess I shouldn't be, but when you see the pyramid and you think that it looks a lot like everybody else, and then you find that the average household size is probably going to be between 6 and 7 when we finish this survey. You realize a lot of people, and many times there are 4 or 5 workers in the family. But Guam has put Micronesian FSM migrants on Guam in 2000, so their income for all of 2000, they made $43 million. So they are putting money into Guam's economy by spending the money that they're making. Some of it, of course, goes back as remittances, but others of it are buying refrigerators and stoves and cars and motorcycles and those kinds of things. The median income sorry, I think this is individuals that we, I don't think it's families, I think it's individuals. I apologize, I didn't realize they hadn't indicated. So it's, it was 20,000, the median is the blue, and it went from about 20,000 down to around 13,000, and then back up to over 20,000 in 2003. The mean income went even higher. The mean is not a very good measure because a few people making a lot of money can distort it quite a bit. But they're not making loads of money, that's for sure. This is individuals, quite sure. Poverty, though, is high. It went from, okay, the one you want to look at is the red line to get the poverty. The others are various amounts of poverty. So about 35% of the Micronesians in 1990 were in poverty. It went to about 68% in 1997, and then back down to under 50% in 2003. Nonetheless, if you have 45% of your population in poverty, that's a lot of people in poverty. And of course, a lot of those people in poverty need social assistance and housing assistance and so forth. And this is what Micronesians were spending. I had a problem in 1997. These data from 1997. In 2003, I tried to include them again, and Interior said, no way, you can't, we don't want to show that kind of positive impact. So we couldn't do it that time, and it wasn't done in the 2008 either. So you have to be stuck with data that are 15 years old. Nonetheless, you can see that housing was the largest category of outgo, and the next one was food. So And some of them, they don't buy a lot of betel nuts, but still, there's about the yellow one, the third one from the end, is betel nut, so they're spending around $50 a year on average on betel nut. I've heard that stir-fried betel nut is quite tasty, but otherwise I'm not too sure why it's that high. And I don't even know how we got that on the questionnaire, frankly. All right, so housing and households. I covered population. I'm going to cover a little bit about housing and households. Okay, it shouldn't be too surprising that most Micronesians live in apartments. Oh, sorry, this is rent. Most rent. And so 90% were renting in 1997, and it was over 80% in 2003. And you can see on the left-hand side that almost nobody owns. And by 2003, about 10% were owning in one form or another. Either they owned outright or they had a mortgage. Now this is a little confusing. If you see the one on the right, it says you're living there without payment of rent. And traditionally, this is people who go out somewhere and build a house and just live there. And there are some people who do that and claim they own it without a mortgage. So it becomes a little bit sticky interpreting the data. Here's the house and an apartment. So I take it back. I was thinking about Hawaii, obviously. In 1997, you can see that about 50% were living in a house, and it went over 60% by 2003. So more and more people were moving to houses. But as noted, these are rental houses for the most part. The apartments, maybe because there are fewer apartments here than there are in Hawaii, is a smaller percentage. I don't know what the other is. I mean, there are people who live in boats and in tents. And during the, I think, well, one of them, we were doing Omar had hit, and we were trying to do the survey after Omar, and a lot of people were in tents. Okay. I just put a few selected housing characteristics, and I'm letting you compare Hawaii with Guam. And if you look, you'll find that for source of water, almost everybody used the public system. For telephone, you can see that Guam people, and this is really before cell phones. I mean, now it would be quite different, but it went from about 50% in 1997 down to about 40% in 2003. Television, most, over 80% had a TV. And what was interesting was the percentage that had no air conditioning. So this is a reversal of the other three. But it also shows that in 2003, only 40% did not have an air conditioner. And there were about 70% who did not have an air conditioner in 1997. So within 6 years, everybody got an air conditioner. I mean, a lot of Micronesians, like everybody else, wanted air conditioning. And so there's some impact on the environment there. For health services used by migrants to Guam in 2003, the largest programs are the ones shown. The very largest was public health nurses, followed by immunization clinics, emergency rooms, and WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children program. 18% of all services for that. And you could have more than one service, so that even though it shows 100%, it could be, people could be in there more. It's all uses, not all people. Okay, but this one is the percent of the FSM migrants who used various services. About 15% were receiving welfare, and we have welfare again in this survey. Whoops. About 40% used food stamps, a very small amount, about 50% had life insurance, about 45% or so had health insurance. More than half purchased medicines in the 12 months before the survey, and visited a private doctor in the previous 6 months, about a third. So they do use public services. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about the 2008 survey, because I'm hoping that some of you will become proactive in thinking about what's the best way of not only counting Micronesians, but counting everybody on Guam. I left the Census Bureau in 2007 and moved to Harvard. So until then, I was doing the surveys, but the Department of Interior decided that they wanted to have the Census Bureau do the survey in 2008, 3 surveys in Hawaii, Guam, and Sinai. And when they did that, the Census Bureau decided that rather than the 300,000 or so that we were given, that Interior gave me in 2003 to do the surveys, they needed $1.3 million. So the part for Guam was about $500,000 to do the survey, although almost none of it was spent on Guam. And they used a different kind of sampling system, and they got 1,731 households on Guam. That was in their selected sample, of which 205 were FSM households. This is what $500,000 will buy you. For Palau, because really, if you're only looking at post-compact, there were 11 households in the Palau sample. Based on this survey, and this would be a way that you could get a sample for labor force surveys and other. Micronesians were 12% of the population. Palau was 2%, and Marshall Islands was 0%, and so everybody else was 86%. This shows you I'm sorry, you're probably getting tired of seeing pyramids, but this shows the pyramid of the Micronesians, the FAS, Freely Associated States. They're in blue, and it looks pretty much like what we were getting before. For some reason, there were very few 15 to 19-year-old females. I don't know why that was, but you can see that the Guam population is quite old. When you see a structure where it's almost straight up and down, that means that it's a little bit older. Okay, what we normally use, and what we're using now, in fact, is what's called snowball technique. You try to find all the households, and so snowball technique is a very bad technique if you're using it for a survey, but if you're using it for a census, meaning you're getting everybody that you can find, then it's quite a good technique, and the Government Accountability Office said that what I was doing was appropriate, but they didn't use that. Census Bureau doesn't believe in it because you can't get a standard error. But when they published the results, they did give the standard error, but then everybody used the midpoint, the average. They do just what we did, but using this different method. The 250 households are really insufficient if you're trying to do planning. And besides that, they didn't ask education, they didn't ask employment, they didn't ask housing, they didn't ask health, they didn't ask remittances. They only asked age, sex, when you came, and where you came from. And the per household costs were rather astronomical. It worked out to about $2,000 a Micronesian household. Oops, okay. I have somehow... Okay, this is just to show you the difference between, it's in the wrong place, but I did want to show that Micronesians do adapt. The one on the right is a more traditional Micronesian marriage on Ulithi, I think. This guy, the one who got married, is now the first secretary in the Washington office of the FSM. And the one on the left was another marriage. The one on the left there is the head of statistics back in Pohnpei. He went back. Okay, I'm going to talk now about our survey and why I think you need to be thinking constantly about what are the best statistics for Guam. Our survey is currently in the field, and so if you are a Micronesian and an enumerator comes to your house, please provide the information. If you're not in the sample and you are a migrant household, please go online. I gave you that information, and do the household or individual questionnaire so that we'll have your information to include as well. It won't be included in the random sample, but it will be included as data for consideration. Processing is, we're now doing checking, coding, keying, and then we'll be doing the editing and tabulating. and then Fran Hiesel will write the final report. I want to stress the role of the UOG Cooperative Extension Service, both in this and in many activities. You're very lucky to have this organization here, and I'm hoping that eventually more of the work will be centered here based on what I see in the other areas. If you look at my last point, in CNMI, USVI, and American Samoa, all of them have central statistical activities, but Guam does not. And I'm not saying that you suffer unduly from this, but you can do better, frankly. Previously, the Cooperative Extension Service coordinated the 2003 Micronesian Migrant Survey, as I mentioned, and the 2005 Household Income and Expenditures, and I'm sure they've done many others without me, but those were the two I was involved in. For the current survey, they've assisted us in finding and selecting the enumerators and the materials and the coding key. These figures will not be used for the distribution of funds. That's because they're not. This is not an official survey. It's a survey from FSM. FSM is going to be using this survey in two ways. One, to assist in showing both the negative and positive, so the net impact of the Micronesians on Guam, Hawaii, and CNMI. But they'll also be looking in terms of economic development for FSM and what might lure people back, people who have left, who might come back to assist in economic development of the country. In 2013, next year, the Census Bureau is not planning to do a survey, at least from the GAO report. They're planning to use the American Community Survey data for Hawaii, which they used the last time in 2008. They didn't do a survey there. And the 2010 census data for Guam and CNMI. What that means to you, if you happen to be a planner here, is there will be only 1.5 years between the reference periods, since the last one was at the end of 2008, and this one will be April 2010. And you will be working immediately. It's already going to be 3 years old before you even start with it, minimum of 3 years old. So you need to think about your role in all of this, in statistical activities. Generally, there are three parts of any statistical system. There's the census, and Guam, unfortunately, does not get the kind of access to its data that you would get if you were a state. You do have a PUMS, but it has no geographical breakdown, so you can only look at Guam whole, the whole of Guam, with a 10% sample. It can help you, but it can't help you with the small groups or small areas. And small groups are important, like Micronesians. So you want to be able to have more access. And if you were a state, you would get that. But as a territory, you don't get it. There are surveys, the Income and Expenditure Survey, and Labor Force Surveys, and you do that. If you were a state, you wouldn't have to do it yourself. It would be done with you, in theory. The only problem is getting access to the data. And I have to compliment the Bureau of Stats and Plans. Is that right? Plans and Stats. What is it? Okay, I apologize. I used to be the Bureau of Planning, and I haven't got used to it even yet. They do this incredible yearbook. I hope that all of you go online and see what an incredible job this small group of people does. I mean, it really can help you in planning. It took us a long time to get it in place, but now that it is, it's continuing, and it's really an incredible resource to Guam. Guam is not a state. This is my last point. There are certain things that states get that Guam does not get. You do not get the American Community Survey. If you were a state, every month, 1/120th of the island would be enumerated. Probably would be more than that. But in the U.S., everybody in the decennial census only gets the short form, a few questions, just like the 2008 Micronesian survey was. But here, you just get data every 10 years. If you only get data every 10 years, you have to wait 10 years for the next data. If you have the American Community Survey, you would have not all the data, but you would have data on a continuing basis, and you would see trends over time. You'll see trends now, but you only get those trends every 10 years, and you don't get a lot of detail. You would also get the current population survey, which is another survey which is taken monthly in the States, and the survey of income and program participation. It's called SIP. States get these automatically and monthly. Instead, you get nothing at all. And this is what we call a great statistical program. What you need to be thinking about is working with your delegate and with the Department of Interior to really think seriously about getting the highest quality statistics, because as Dr. Underwood said at the very beginning of this evening, statistics are important. You can do a lot with them. I'm sure some of you are falling asleep from too many statistics in this talk. However, you can use them and you can put real people behind them, and you can understand better the situation on Guam. And with respect to Hawaii, the mainland, and other Pacific islands, and you can't do that as well with the data that you're getting now. All right, this is to ease you into the end. This was a picture I took on my second field trip, Ifaluk. It wasn't blue. They put it on the cover of Science News, and when they did that, they told me that they had to have a picture where there were people in it, and ocean and land, but you couldn't tell who the people were, so they didn't have to be sued. So this was the picture they selected, and they put that on the cover of their magazine. I want to thank you for your attention, and the site is here that you can go to get more information. And I was told I needed to put my email, so if you want to contact me, you can use that email. And thank you very much for your time and attention and for the light.
So, does anybody have any questions to ask? You're going to have to shout or stand up and use your theater voice.
I just had two questions of clarification. The first one was the PUMS. Yeah, I was just wondering about it. And then on slide 43, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit better about healthcare participation. I didn't understand the way the pie was broken down.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you would have to show the pie. I mean, this was all cases of use. So if they used WIC, that counted once. If they used public health nurses, that counted once. So people will be in there more than once. So the total is the total number of cases, not the total number of people using it. Okay? So that's all instances. PUM stands for Public Use Microdata Sample. Every country is now doing, almost every country, any country I work in, and I'm about to go to Ghana, Nigeria, and Uganda next week, not all in 1 week. But we always, when we finish the census, we now select a sample so that people like you at the university can run your own tables and do your own analysis based on that. But it is a sample, and we make sure confidentiality is maintained.
I was wondering if the surveys are only in English or if they're translated into the different languages.
That's an excellent question. The surveys are in English. However, because what we normally do, but we're not doing completely here, is every enumerator has to be from the area. So they tend to do it in the vernacular in their own. We don't translate them because the very first time I did a census, which was in 1974 in American Samoa, we wanted to translate it, but everyone said, don't translate it, everybody translates it differently, just leave it in English. If they want to translate it, they can translate it. I learned a lesson from that, and basically we don't put out translations. If the enumerators, we hope the enumerators understand what they're supposed to ask, and in most cases it comes in. And they must record in English, since people in the office are going to be doing it in English.
Yes, that's the Nigerian data from your website there, the Micronesian 2012 Micronesian Migration. And I was on step 2, but apparently in the age 4 and age 5 question, I have to input the data that says what is the amount of your rent, whether it's a Guam or government housing or whatever. And it sort of had a format, but did you have codes available on your website?
Oh, well, not for that item. Okay, I can't guarantee the flow. We will check it now that you brought it up. But for the rent, we collect the total rent, whether it's with or without government assistance, and then the government assistance part. So you can, by subtraction, you can get the part that the householder pays, or the household pays by subtraction, and we'll be doing that one under that as well. Yes?
Does your survey show division of labor based on gender, and then the percentage of females who work and in what kind of job?
Yeah.
I've been looking, I can't find that anywhere.
Well, you can find it in the previous ones online if you go to the pacificweb.org for Micronesian Migrant Surveys for that survey. If you have tons, then you would be able to run your own. We will make many tables. I mean, all tables just about are done by sex because it's such an important variable. So normally we would display income, employment characteristics, and education by sex. So you'll see that in the final tables. You don't see it in the questionnaire because they're separated, but when we start doing the crosses, then of course you'll see it.
Any other questions?
So you mentioned that Dr. Underwood opened the desk by looking at the policy implications of this kind of information. And you pretty dramatically showed that the population distribution has now come closer to the Guam population distribution in terms of age and gender and so forth. But yet, these people are considered still to be included in the computation of adverse impact, meaning that the governments of Micronesia bear some sort of responsibility for that impact. If this was being done, for example, in the United States, and measuring the impact of undocumented migration in California, for example, after the second and third generation, such distinctions would no longer be relevant. Why is it that in the case of Micronesia continues to be that kind of an issue?
Well, it hasn't been that long that the Micronesians begin. The migration of Micronesians is not that different from the traditional. I live in Boston. If you look at the Irish migration, it took a generation before they became part of it. And the same thing with the Mexican situation, of course, is different because there's ongoing migration. But when you find the kind of migration that the Micronesians are doing, it will take a generation before, I mean, yes, we see it, but it's still not exactly the same as Guam's. It's still in formation. But I think that the current survey that we're doing is going to show more and more integration. Now, the fact of the matter is that the Micronesians are less educated than many groups of migrants, and so many of them are still doing entry-level jobs, and it's going to take somewhat longer. But we do expect to see a similar pattern a little longer. I may not answer your question, but yes.
I think there was an assumption in the statement that was just made earlier that this is the United States. And for me, something like this eventually would be beneficial in the studies of Guam as a colony. Very different kinds of information are needed when we're emerging as a people to be developed.
Well, I don't know Guam. I don't know Guam's history as well as I probably should, but I'm working with Ellie Nordike in Hawaii on revising the peopling of Hawaii. It shows the flows of the migrants to Hawaii and how they became part of the Hawaiian mosaic. And we may see something similar in Guam, Guam mosaic, where people come, many integrate completely into the society, others remain in pockets. I don't know. I guess I feel my job is to give you the facts, and it's your job to make the interpretation how you want to handle that. And some people will look at it one way, beneficial, some will look at it a different way. And I want to provide you with the highest quality facts so you can make those judgments.
Dr. Bomba?
Thank you, Professor. The excellent work we've done over so many years for the region here, in Guam, and various countries inside CNI and so forth. As we begin to talk, I did wonder about the significance of your work in relation to the region in which you work. the kind of data that is necessary for them to understand their own development where they are in relation to other countries of the world, in relation to other history like Irish and other people who have migrated to the United States. This information is very important for the development of people wherever they are, even if they are not state. So that's the question I was thinking about, because I had been a consultant, and one of my recent consultancies, I went around migration, martial life. I went to Palau, I went to the center, and then I had seen the other two Micronesians gave us migrations in the Solomon Islands in Fiji. And the interesting thing that was happening about these people is trying to understand themselves. And the feeling of togetherness is beginning to emerge. There is a contact inspired some, except those who are British, who are part of the forum fighting for British. The CNMI and Guam are temporary to the United States, unincorporated territory. They are part in the future. It is circumscribed by whatever they will decide to understand. What I'm saying is that this is tremendous stuff that you've done, the knowledge, the skills, and you say what all of our academics would normally say. I am an academic. I offer you the figures. I don't give you the interpretation. You know, Professor Levin, that you don't do that. We pretend to do that. You know that you're constrained by that, and some of us, I'm also a professor, former professor. We pretend that, and we want to present the figure that is a professorial figure. But the harnessing of the data that you have, and as I've been around the whole of Micronesia, the need for planners, the need for statistics people is so urgent, particularly in Palau, particularly in FSM, for the various states. Also in Panama. So this is an opportunity for places like, I'm very happy to hear that the University of Guam is beginning to use stats now, or say something like that. And I think that's a possible beginning. Demography will become a very important aspect of this for the region, and the training of statistics people and people like that may also flow out into the area. We have the same problem in Fiji, but some professors of academics of economics have decided to take all that just about the time.
Okay, well, thank you.
I'm just raising that as an issue.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, I'm not at Harvard for my Micronesian statistics. So they want something a little bit larger than that. And they also want what you said, interpretation. But I think that they've given me a lot of leeway within that to work specifically on statistical data. Do you maybe want more?
Yes, we're here now.
Well, is there somebody else who hasn't asked a question yet?
No, there it is.
Okay, all right. I was wondering if you had any questions on utilization of technology, things like internet access.
Yes.
And then the second question was, okay, well, we'll go with that.
Yeah, we have, if you have a computer, you use the internet. But there are also, Fran Diesel was very big on cultural things. So we have things, do you have handicrafts in your house? Do you have a FSN flag? Do you get together with people? How much do you spend on weddings and funerals and that kind of thing? So there are a lot of cultural information on this, as well as the small amount of technical that you talked about. We do ask those questions. Thank you very much.
We have a parting gift for you. First of all, how about another round of applause? The kinds of statistics that you're dealing with are really very contentious in Guam, because they will be very contentious. And of course, the unique nature of this particular account, and maybe it's not really fully understood, is that this is sponsored by the FSM government, which makes it have another unique feature to it, which you know I'm very heartened by, and of course I'm very proud of the university's role in this. So that's another plug. Where is Mr. Barcina? And so, can you think of another word for that other than snowball? Since we are in the tropics, can we think of another word for that technique? But on behalf of the University of Guam, present you this gift that's engraved with your name on it, and it's in recognition of your contribution. And hopefully that,
thank you so much.
hopefully we'll have a good relationship in the future, and please continue to provide us with whatever statistics and assistance. Thank you.